All right, that was good. Never got it back.
It's the old camera, the new one broke, is that what happened?
Yeah, whatever.
Oh, it's in the ceilings down too, so.
You know, I think it'll be okay if they don't see us from one perspective.
Yeah, that's true. That's how we paid 185 to the 1970s house. House sequence trailer apartment in another building. Oh, for the rent every month is 1,000, but you gotta own the place anyway, and even the older ones are selling for like 180. And the ones that the building owns.
You're talking about one that's like just down.
It's like at that corner, in fact, like right back here, on Herman and Tualatin.
The lot rentals in thousand a month. And the three month for how much year?
More than 200.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's that expensive. It's pretty cheap.
They're like that 1,200 if you're like, oh, and then you can't do anything.
Okay. Well,
I was like, somebody has to be now. Okay. Yeah. I would like to call to order the July 15th, 2026 Planning Commission meeting. Lisa, please proceed with roll call. Thank you. And I apologize and please correct me if I get any names. Chair Thompson. Here. Vice Chair Limmer.
Here.
Commissioner Kuhn. Commissioner Lettick.
Here.
Commissioner Paragini.
Here.
Commissioner Lindley.
Here.
And Commissioner McKenna. Here. We have a quorum present this evening, so we will proceed with our agenda items. Actually, we are all here. So that's great. First is announcements. First on our agenda is announcements and planning commission communications. Commissioners, do you have any announcements? Okay. Next is approval minutes, consideration of April 15th, 2026 planning commission minutes. Do any commissioners have any corrections or wish to discuss the minutes? They need to update Zach's name and adjourn. Oh.
How did I miss that?
That is fine. He was just. So barring that exception, do I have a motion?
Motion approved.
Do I have a second? Second. Okay. I have a motion from Commissioner Lettick, sorry, Commissioner Randy, and a second from Kuhn? No? Zach? Yeah, that's me. Yeah. To approve the April 15th, 2026 Planning Commission minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? One absent. Motion carried. Okay. Okay, so next is communication with public on non-agenda items. If there's anyone here that wishes to testify on a non-agenda item, now is the time to do so. You'll have 3 minutes to provide your testimony. I think everybody's here for what's on the agenda. Okay. So first, our first action item on the agenda is a staff presentation to introduce Tualatin's contextualized housing need and housing capacity analysis project to address the state requirement. Staff, are you please put that.
Good evening, my name is Erin Nathan. I'm 25 Tracy Oliver, our planning manager. And tonight, with the assistance of our consultants, we will be introducing the housing capacity analysis project. And this project will help us answer two very important questions. What types of housing should Tualatin plan for in the future? And do we have enough buildable land in the right locations to meet our future housing needs? This work fulfills state requirements and supports a council priority identified in Tualatin's 23 vision. And the presentation will be led by our consultants. We have Mary Chase and Matt Brady with Echo Northwest joining us today. Are you guys able to hear us okay?
Hi, kind of. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, you can hear me. Okay, yeah.
Okay. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but thank you for joining us. And with that, I will hand it over.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Erin. And it sounds like you all can hear me. We can hear. It's a little bit muffled, but it sounds like you worked out most of the audio. So we'll continue to proceed. If I miss someone's question, please like wave your hands at me or something, and I'll stop and try to answer the question as best as possible. Erin, are you sharing the screen for our slide deck, or did you want us to do that?
Do you have a preference? It seems like we are queued up and we can present, or if you prefer to lead the pace, that's okay with us too.
Yes, I think we could do it. Mary, would you be able to share I think you've got the deck up. Is that right? Okay. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. All right, here we go. We're going to jump right into the slide deck here. So good to be with you all this evening. My name is Matt Craig. I'm a project director with Echo Northwest. And joining me is Mary Chase, a project manager on our team here. So we're working with Erin and staff on all sorts of fun acronymed projects. So tonight we're going to talk about the HCA and the CHN, and we'll give you a little preview of the HPS, which is later on. And don't worry, we will go through all of these acronyms. Next slide, please. So this evening's presentation is going to be a summary of these projects, the CHN and the HCA, which we have just kicked off with city staff. And we presented a similar presentation to the city council last month here. So this is our first opportunity to talk with you all on the planning commission. We're going to talk about the what, the how, the why, and I guess the who to some extent. And this information also includes the data that's required and some of the analysis that's required by the state. We're going to present to your commission 4 times over the course of this process. We'll walk you through each time that we're going to come to your commission and what we'll be talking about each one of those. At the end of the presentation, we will definitely have time for questions and discussion. So looking forward to that. Next slide, please. So we're going to start with some definitions and an overview of the CHN and HCA process. Next slide. Okay, so we promise we won't have a pop quiz at the end of this. We know that there's tons of acronyms in this work here. So at the top level, the CHN is the Contextualized Housing Needs Analysis. This is an analysis that identifies needed housing for Tualatin by type, characteristics, and location. Location is considered. So it talks about housing types like single-family homes, townhomes, multifamily housing units, characteristics of housing units, things like number of bedrooms and limit of ADA accessibility. And then, yes, location is also part of the mix. We will be looking around at specific, parts of the community and identifying areas that are suitable for increased housing development. The HCA is the housing capacity analysis. This is the companion analysis to the CHN. It estimates the capacity for buildable land for housing. And so this is the part where we'll be really digging into the supply of land. So we're looking at potentially developable land for housing while taking into account where there is already land that is developed, land that is partially developed, and where there are constraints. And so I'm sure this is a planning commission. You're all familiar with a lot of these terms, a lot of this work, right? So constraints, things like slopes, wetlands, and other constraints that would prevent housing development. There's a third study which we'll just touch on just a little bit this evening, but it is not kind of part of the duo package of the CHN and the HCA that we're working on right now. That's the HPS, the Housing Production Strategy. So that is the implementation focused plan to encourage new housing developments. That project would be scoped and would come after the CHN and the HCA in 2027. You might be familiar with the former term for these projects. The HNA, the Housing Needs Analysis, is the term that used to be used for a similar type of analysis. The state changed the process recently, and so it's HNAs have turned into CHNs and HCAs. Next slide, please. And so a few more definitions here as well. So these are some of the components of the HCA. So a buildable lands inventory that is kind of taking a look at all of the parcels of land within Tualatin and identifying, like I was talking about, those that are already developed and where there's potential for new development, taking into account some of those constraints both from a regulatory standpoint, so land use, different zones, city boundaries, planning areas, but then also the physical constraints around wetlands, slopes, things like that. The DRLI, the Development Ready Lands Inventory, takes that to a next step and looks specifically at where there is land that is ready for new housing development. And the RLNA, oh my gosh, so many acronyms, is kind of a more finite analysis there. So yeah, and then again, we're talking about the HPS as coming later. Next slide, please. So what work has already been done? So the state requires the housing analysis cycle, and Mary's going to talk a little more about this. Within the metro region is for every 6 years. Tualatin last completed the HNA before the pandemic in 2019 and an HPS in 2021. The chart on the right there is an example of some of the data from that analysis in 2019. So this chart shows the share of estimated new households in Tualatin. In this case, the analysis estimated there would be roughly even split there. You can see along those groupings of extremely low to middle income. These are bracketed income brackets by median family income, about 15% per category there. And then estimated that about 40% of households would be in that higher income category. So that's over 120% of median family income. In 2023, Tualatin also adopted an equitable housing funding plan. This is kudos to Tualatin, to you all. This is an above and a beyond type of project that is not required actually in the state process. So the equitable housing funding plan provided a deeper dive on implementing new tools and getting that HPS going with a focus on affordability and accessibility to multiple types of households. Next slide, please. So here is an overview of the process. And Mary's going to have a little bit more detail on some of this here. Happy to answer some questions here, but we've got 4 phases of the HCA CHN process. So some of them run concurrently or overlap here. You'll see at the bottom of the slide, importantly, that we're coming to your commission 4 times over the course of these projects. We're also coming to the City Council there, CC, 4 times. Like I mentioned, we just presented to the City Council last month. So working our way towards adoption of these documents by the City Council. They're in that last phase, which would be in the spring of 27. So just a brief overview here. The first phase, which we've already kicked off, well underway here. This is booting things up, starting the data gathering process for the CHN, doing some project planning, including preparing for engagement and engagement with communities across Tualatin. We're well now into this second phase here, where we're looking, doing the CHN analysis. In fact, the next time that we come to your commission next month, I think, I think we've got the date here later on. I think it's late August. We'll be talking about some of the results of that CHN analysis that we've been working on. In this second phase, we're also going to kick off engagement activities. And so that's already started. This is an important part of the group, important part of the work, of course. Engagement includes not only coming to your commission, to the city council, but making sure that we are engaging with a number of different communities across Tualatin. And so we're working with city staff to organize those and to get out and have some conversations. That engagement also includes engagement with tribes. And so we have, we're reaching out to some tribes here this month to make sure that they are informed and in part of this process. In phase three, and phase three is just kind of starting off now, we're getting into it. This is where we're doing a lot of that intensive spatial analysis. So the BLI and the DRLI, where we're taking a look at the land in Tualatin and where development has happened, where housing might go, what that looks like. So we're getting that well underway. And then the fourth phase there, which will kick off around the holidays and wrap up there in the spring, which is where we start to wrap up the RLNA, which addresses how much land and what type of zoning Tualatin might need to accommodate new housing. And that will be, they'll be wrapping up this spring. So so we'll be in front of you all to have a discussion, get your input 4 times over the process. This meeting, and then our next meeting is going to be in August. Next slide, please. Terrific. Okay, and I think I'm turning it to you, Mary, now to talk about some key context, starting with the state's process. It's talking about the ONA and the state's process and what's required by the state. So go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So I'll dive into it here and just give a summary of what's required by the state. Some things have changed since the last HNA. So this is more of a recap of what the process looks like now. And we'll jump in here with talking about the ONA, or the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis. This is an important guide for this work that provides a calculation of housing needs statewide and breaks that down for regions and for jurisdictions. The methodology for this report accounts for a lot of different factors. So it's accounting for housing under production, so current and future need. It's accounting for homelessness, population growth, second and vacation homes. It gets into demographic factors, and it takes all of those things and gives numbers for jurisdictions across the state. And we'll get into what that number is for Tualatin in a little bit in these slides. But really what that gives is the starting place for doing the housing capacity analysis, or the HCA. And that builds off of what the state has already done with the ONA. The point of the next step of conducting the HCA is, like this indicates here, to find a realistic estimate of long and near-term residential capacity. And the word realistic, it can be flexible, but really we don't want to overestimate or underestimate housing capacity. As much as possible, we want to get close to a real estimate to measure whether current capacity can meet that need and be able to track and plan for that in the next planning period. So we'll skip over here a little bit about the UGB because we are in Metro, and it's opening up a different set of weeds than other parts of the state. But really, this is intended to start building towards some of those actions and timelines for meeting housing needs through housing production and making sure that it's covering different affordability levels and providing choice for residents of Tualatin. We'll touch a little bit on that next phase of the housing production strategy in this, but right now we're trying to lay that groundwork for what the housing needs are and what Tualatin's capacity is. This next slide helps to demonstrate how those different components of these plans are supposed to work together. We start with that ONA allocation, which is in the top left corner there. And this chart maybe looks a little bit more linear than reality, just as a heads up. Essentially, some of these are happening simultaneously, but what comes out of the contextualized housing needs analysis really informs housing need for the HCA overall. So we have that component that's feeding into the HCA. We also have the development ready lands inventory that Matt started touching on, which is also part of the scope of this project. And that's based in the buildable lands inventory, or the BLI, which isn't explicitly shown here, but really it's meant to get at what land can reasonably be considered for residential development and part of that final HCA as well. And again, that later, we're going to skip over this UGB amendment piece of the graphic, but feeds into the HPS and then feeds into that returning back through this process of analyzing it after the HPS period. So getting a little bit more into the specific components of the HCA in this process, the contextualized housing needs assessment, it's the determination of needed housing that gets into type of housing. It looks at things like single unit, multi-unit, and middle housing. It also looks at characteristics like tenure and affordability, accessibility, visibility, and all that falls into this analysis about what housing options are available and what has gaps that needs to be filled in Tualatin. Again, we look at affordability, we look at fair housing choice, we look at location analysis, past discriminatory actions, and there is a required community engagement component that feeds into the qualitative side of this assessment. There's a lot of emphasis in the rules on engagement with low-income communities, people with disabilities, people of color, and tribal engagement, like Matt was starting to get into, which will all be part of this project, primarily through focus groups and trying to meet people where they are as much as possible. So to pull this together and talk about the housing capacity analysis overall, this is where we combine that information from the CHN, looking at historical development trends and what we've seen in the BLI and the DRLI, and use that to estimate capacity within Tualatin's existing land and whether it'll be able to meet those anticipated housing needs. And I know we talked about this a bit more, but estimating that capacity of buildable land, that's one thing we'll be bringing back soon, just based on historical development and, again, trying to get as realistic of an estimate as we can. Then we just have this quick look ahead at the HPS. And this is not where we are as part of this project, but where it starts to build that foundation and lead to thinking about those policy interventions and thinking about how to meet those housing needs, especially if the outcome is that the capacity does not currently allow for meeting those needs and what adjustments have to be made. So I am going to pass it back to Matt. We can pause for a second if we want to, if folks have questions, but otherwise, Matt, I can pass it back your way.
Sure. I would suggest that we roll through. We just have a few more slides here, and then we're going to get to the next steps. So unless there's a burning question, see if I can see some hands. I don't see any hands. Let's get through these next few slides, and then happy to jump into that discussion. So these next couple of slides show a preview of some of the analysis that's part of this work. So with each of these analyses, the state requires cities to consider housing on both a short and a long term. So short term in this case is 6 years, long term is 20 years. Some of this analysis, some of this work is already started by the state to help communities understand the level of demand for housing over these planning periods. So the table that we're looking at here is the state's forecast for dwelling units by AMI, so broken down by area median income for housing over the planning periods. So this is when they talk about the housing allocation, this is the housing allocation. These are the targets for Tualatin to hit over those two planning horizons. Next slide, please. So this graphic, we love to use this graphic. Sometimes we dress up a little bit more with jobs as well. We think this is a great way to talk about housing affordability. So this house graphic has these different categories. The different colors that you're seeing from left to right here are area median income brackets. So going from 30% of AMI on the left to 120% of AMI in the right. Note this is AMI for a family of four. And so it's just the question, if your household earns X amount of dollars, then you can afford so much in rent or so much in a home sale price. And so this is using some benchmarks around how much, the slice of the total income of a household, typically 25 to 30% that they can spend on housing there. So you can kind of start to see the linkage between incomes and housing affordability. The CHN and HCA take this to another step and start to look at your housing market and start to look at prices of homes in different housing types. And then try to kind of crosswalk the two and say, well, what are these incomes looking like in Tualatin, and what are homes on the market selling for, or apartments renting for, to give us a really good detailed look about what's happening there and what some of the need is. Next slide. So in summary here, the one way to think about these two studies, the CHN and the HCA, is that the CHN really is the demand half of this study. So we're an economics firm, right? We like to talk about supply and demand. So the CHN really is the demand study. It's taking a look at the trends within the community and kind of the contextualized housing needs. So adding context and kind of breaking down not just population growth, but types of households and needs by different types of communities, and putting together that whole demand picture to say, here's what the need looks like within Tualatin over these planning horizons. The HCA is the supply type, and supply here we're talking about land, and land that's specifically developable for housing. So the HCA has that BLI, that buildable lands inventory, where we are building a GIS map, and we're going to have a fun interactive map that folks can use and take a look at. Building this map of all of Tualatin and kind of, canceling out some of those constraints that we talked about and say, well, where are there places where housing would be appropriate here, and what kind of housing would go in those places? So we've got a demand study, we've got a supply study, and then the HPS. I do a lot of economic development work with wonderful staff from Tualatin around economic development. I'm always interested in implementation. I know that you all are interested in implementation. It's the HPS, that study that comes later, where those actions and strategies are identified to say, okay, we've got all of the supply and demand information from these two studies. What do we do with that? What are some of the policy choices that your commission and the city council should consider to make sure that everyone in Tualatin is getting their housing needs met? So that's kind of wrap up here. Next slide. I think we've got a couple more slides. So next steps. Okay, next slide, please. I think this slide is a little bit outdated here. I think we are meeting on 7/15 here now, but I think that next date is correct there. August 19th, we'll be meeting with you all to talk about the CHN results, the contextualized housing needs results, and then we'll be back with you all, I think, in late October with a draft BLI and the DRLI, those two spatial analysis pieces. And there, I think we've wrapped it up here. We'd love to open it up to questions and discussion. So thank you.
I was here for the housing needs assessment, and so I can kind of see the difference. They basically broke it down to two separate studies that you're doing instead of just the housing needs assessment. Is that correct? Or is there much more of a difference than that?
Yeah, so the past process. Thank you, Commissioner. You participated in the HNA in the past, and so the new process has broken it out into the CHN and the HCA as a way to have kind of more of a detailed look at each of those pieces, supply and demand, separately.
How we can do it, and then they're calling it. Yes, but and then we're not going to no act, like you said, no action until later. Right. And they did do a lot of work with involvement in the forums of the commission that worked on that here in town as well. Just what I think is fairly recently, because COVID stole all of our lives. So, so hopefully you've got at least some background that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Yeah, and
Yeah, is Beth Goodman still with Eco Northwest?
Is Beth Goodman still with Eco Northwest? Yes.
Yeah,
Beth Goodman is still with Eco Northwest.
it's
And
yes, to me, the last time we talked about this was 3 years ago with her. And I noticed, for example, going back to the charts that she presented, the AMI has increased significantly. And the question I have for you is the number of dwelling units that you showed on that chart that we need to address. Those came from where? How were those assigned?
that comes through yes, thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, Beth is still with us, and Beth is our secret sauce to all of this work. Beth is one of the state specialists with lots of experience in this work, and so she is an advisor on all of the 8 or so CHNs and HCAs that we're working on. So, Commissioner, your question I think was about this table here on slide 14. Yeah, so that is the housing allocation that comes out of the ONA. So where the state has done some analysis with communities across the state to say, here is the housing allocation, here's the housing target, given some of those factors that Mary talked about around population growth, number of second homes. Mary, I know you worked on that, I think, right? So there's a number of other pieces here that go into the target by AMI for both of the planning periods.
Yeah, so my question on this is, how has this changed since 3 years ago as well? I'm sure we were looking at some kind of projected dwelling unit need at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that those numbers weren't part of the ONA. I think that ONA has happened since then. So how can you tell just briefly how this has changed, increased, or what the difference is?
Yeah, I don't have those numbers at the tip of my fingers here, Commissioner, but that is certainly something that we can follow up on to say in the last process, the last HNA process in 2019, what was the projection and how does that match up with these numbers here? I'd be happy to bring that information back to your commission.
Yeah, is it just based on population increase, or I'd like to know a little bit more about how the differences. What is happening in the planning process that we can't just take off from where we were 3 years ago? Obviously, there's something has changed. The AMI has made some impact, but I'm curious about the number of dwelling units that we are now assigned to need to try to figure out space for this community. We've had a lot of development occur in the last 3 years, and so I'm curious how that balances out against this projected need. So a lot of numbers are in play here. And I hope that you'll be able to present a picture to us on what has changed, why it's changed, and where we're headed with this now, and why it won't change 3 years from now based on some other information or rule change. If you could help us out.
Great. Yeah, that's a terrific question, Commissioner, and we'll make sure to come back with answers to that question at our next meeting next month.
I guess to piggyback on Randy's just real quick too, it would be interesting to know how well we've been.
There you go.
Yeah, that would just be interesting.
Because oftentimes we get geared up to do all kinds of analysis. And I know then it's difficult to monitor over the past 3 years, and then something else happens. And well, how well did we meet the projection, or what has changed, and higher or lower, or why? And I know Aaron's going to submit a bunch of questions to you too that I have about the buildable lands inventory and how that has changed, and that the methodology for calculating that has changed as well. So you might be prepared to answer that question for me a few months from now. Terrific. All right. We're taking these down, Commissioner, and we will come prepared in the next meeting. Thank you for those questions. And say hi to Beth for us.
We will.
Any other questions? I have to say, I appreciate the fact you guys are sort of piecemealing this out to us, because it's kind of great to get a little piece and then we can kind of move on to the next stage. So thank you for that.
Terrific. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, another question. I think we're ready to move on to our second action item. Thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you next month.
Thank you. And Mary too. The second action item on the agenda is a staff presentation to provide an update on the 12th Sherwood Road rail crossing study.
Mike McCarthy, city engineer as well. Bringing an update on 12 and Sherwood Rail Crossing Study. And just, how many of you have been to one of these? Quite a few. And are you familiar with the project or even following along? Okay. So I'll try to breeze through some of the background stuff fairly quickly, since it's something you're all pretty familiar with. So. The power on.
Always a great first question.
It's working earlier. There's the big button. You want, you can tell the next slide. Next slide.
Old school. Thanks for being
All
here.
right. Yeah. Okay. So now let's talk about project overview. We'll go through what we found, we'll look at some conditions. And then some has public use. Alternatives submitted. We'll talk about some evaluation of that, and where we're going next in the next slide. And this is the overview of the general area. We ended up looking at particularly the intersection of 12 and Sherwood Road and Gooseberry. Really a lot of factors kind of kept leading us back. Like one was going through a transportation system plan. This area had probably this sort of an epicenter of traffic transportation problems. And then also we're looking at revitalizing your downtown. Well, how do you walk across one Sherwood Road? They're terrible. And what are some things that we can do about that? This is a particularly massive place to start this yesterday. And also, just in general, in this area, so those all combined, and the survey becomes part of the transportation plan. We had a couple different projects. One was have a nondescript pedestrian bridge over 12 and Sherwood Road that they really highly. And then some improvements to this particular intersection. Also stored in the we can look at. The numbers on the slide are the intersections. Done some particular analysis of problem balance and how it might work. The process. So we're getting about partway through. We've had our first big round of public engagement, and I've got a lot of great ideas for alternatives and taking a look at the possibility of feasibility for some of the lives. Be coming up on our next round of public input. And one of the questions you probably have is, why do you have this? And why are you involved? And one is we want your opinions. We want you to review the process. We'll also be advising the council about bringing your advice to them. We'd love to have you participate more in some of the future public thoughts and sort of concerns. And then at the end, our goal is to get to a preferred alternative. And as close as we can to a city consensus on this is what we want. And then that would be that. And the plan would be to amend the transportation system plan with that. But right now we have two projects at the 12th and Sherwood intersection. And one is a small project based on just that grade of the intersection. There. And then it's a big project with some sort of acceleration. So the hope at the end of this is to have management changes. Any questions so far? Environment emissions, one big one that affects us is the one that living in the flood. That's particularly going down alternatives. Because they can get into the water too cold for functional classification of the roadways, 12 Sherwood's primary arterial. Moose Ferry is one of the biggest south arterials. Next. The rail, some of the big constraints there. We have the crossing here. And then if we start messing and changing the runway grade, the west station is pretty close. So it's going to raise the rail, still be high on the station. Then down the 12 road crossing. Cross railroad. The other issue is if we're going to be doing something, we have to do what we call a sheet line, temporarily go up through the city somehow. A lot of space. Those two reduce the these buildings. Take a look at our traffic operations and bar graph on the right. The number of vehicles per hour going through this intersection. Highest is 3,822. And that's one of the highest. One of the other key takeaways for me on this is how flat this line is. This is one of the flattest lines I've seen for traffic volumes. Tells me a couple different things. One is it's really busy. I think with a lot of people that are watch this, my shade and the rest of them these intersections we're talking about. Also tell them we probably have capacity restrictions in the hour, so we don't see the normal peak days. That traffic may be like 12 road. The red and blue lines, just straight through volumes, intersection in each direction. One of the changes is that from the way it's kind of always been seen. It's always been the paradigm that traffic goes to downtown Portland from downtown Portland. And what we're seeing here is we're seeing more traffic westbound. I think two allowing employment areas, and then eastbound. That means it's fairly close to even, but westbound is and fairly recently had our advisory committees. Some of you, those forms on the right are very thank you those who filled those out. And it's really appreciate all the creativity you saw people from alternatives on the maps. Some of the results we got, some of the goals that were most important. Community development. Really building up a community, livability, safety, things like multimodal mobility, travel reliability. And then from what people heard about the alternatives, they need to listen. One of the questions. Rollover rail got a lot of people saying we should. And then we had a wording thing in our next category of data. And it's at-grade transportation system improvements only. And I think some people may have gotten confused. Either look at that along with other options, like along with the bridges or along with also include stuff that just fits the service. And then some people read it as just. So try to figure out the distinction there. 12 people selected that one. 4 of those only selected that one. So it takes to mean that they were saying forget the bridge. The other end, since they also check the wood separation option, so. Possibly. Particularly to will walk us through some of the ideas that were submitted. And they're really solid. There are a number of times where we consolidated multiple suggestions.
I'm glad that you're working with the amendments, going a little bit faster, a couple of them. We have 17 to get to today, so that code is not responsible for it. The first one is kind of the most basic, no build, everything remains as is. The next one is with widening and straightforward, just adding additional through lanes. Yeah, very straightforward. Road narrowing, this one was an interesting one because here was that if we narrow it and prioritize transit and bike facilities, that people would be discouraged to travel through Walton in like a single occupant car. I also should mention that the little circle in the upper right corner is one that we currently not something like that.
Or the red circle.
Oh, the pink ones versus the blue ones. Oh,
We're thinking more red and green, I think.
I remember that. The next one is safety enhancements. This would probably be something that we would look at with any alternative. We definitely want to make safety better. But this was just a very specific alternative that was submitted. So next we have so here's where things get more interesting. So we have local connections maintained at the signal at 89, and then constructing a right in, right out. That right here. And then we also illustrated right here, so this would be Walton Road going over Bloomsbury Railroad.
Is that the west side of the lake by the splash pad light that's back there? Where you come in to go to the bank at the hotel, then turn into a one.
Yeah.
This was actually.
So up north of there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think this existing signal is like right in the hotel, and then Tilton Road's very, so they're really right in, right out.
You said this also elevates Fulton Sherwood Road up over Bloomsbury on the road.
That's why these connect.
That's why
That's one of the hardest. issues.
Well, that's, yeah, once you go up, yes.
It's still letting people turn or how would they reach it?
So next we have another similar version to this, except the intersection located here. That's like the intersection.
Yeah, the one, sorry.
Yes.
Abby, could you explain maintain local connections, why that is?
Yes, so we have obviously existing signals and existing property driveways. And so we don't want to take away access from a property. So it either needs to remain or reroute it for a different access. So like properties in here, just throughout all the alternatives, making sure that access remains or we reroute them.
Okay, so basically no properties lose their right of way.
Well, they might just right away because there's access.
Yeah,
Yes.
so you could still get into bushwhackers from the backside if they start working on the McDonald's side. You can still get into the dentist or the Elks from the, what is that, the Sagert side, if they start working on the Warp Spring side.
Well, not just during work, but after the road's
Yes.
been raised up, you can't then turn off some of the places where you
Right.
had previously accessed.
So they're little side roads.
Yeah.
Yes, and then there's also a little asterisk on that, for example, this one, like, if we would be going through a certain property, we would be taking that property, so right away, it wouldn't have access anymore, but maintaining it for the properties that would remain.
Taking these purchasing.
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah. Hopefully we know.
Straight evident to me.
Yeah. Were any of these property owners there? Sorry, were any of the property owners there? For any of these things, do you know?
I wasn't sure if any showed up, but we sent mailers.
Okay, so they were informed, so they could have showed up.
Yeah, we sent mailers to a couple of hundred in like for this.
One of our items
Get that road back to where it stops. Since we take the light.
We have a single point urban exchange, so this one has. It ramps up Walton Road and then the ramps provide access. It's a little bit hard to visualize for this one, but Bloomsbury Road safe at grade, Walton Road over, and then a couple of ramps.
Like a freeway.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so kind of like a freeway.
So you still have an interchange there for left and right traffic,
Yes.
just
Oh, it's
across.
local.
But you still need local connection.
Okay.
Well, you do sort of go around, that's correct.
So you raise it up, still keep a stoplight there.
Yeah, this one would be a lot of right away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're gonna go.
we're trying to envision how this would go. One of the options seems to be the traffic on the intersection. Turning traffic, go left one up,
Oh, wow.
signal on top, it's just turning traffic. Down, essentially the left.
So just going north, we're in Bridgeport, just keep going.
And squeeze that in between the rail, have the immovable object and stuff. And then Donald, wants to take up the Donald Drive. So,
It also sounds like to make it happen, you would be making a mousetrap.
yeah,
Painting on the ground.
Wait, so it's just, so is this one's yellow, so it's a maybe, is that correct?
correct.
It's sort of thinking about it, but has.
Or it has some variation.
Oh, okay.
So very similar. I think I made it mix up. The last one was elevating Bloomsbury and then Walton Sherwood at the ramps, and then this one is elevating Walton Sherwood and then Bloomsbury has the ramps. A very similar concept.
Right.
So did you say that other one was elevating Bloomsbury over?
It's a little hard to tell from the drawing.
Yeah.
I think the last one. Well, should be.
But there's an option for either one. Yes, like if the northbound traffic to Bridgeport just got to go,
Yeah.
or if the westbound traffic just got to go.
Some of them were a little bit hard to interpret.
It was not easy to draw these on.
Yeah.
Thank you all for trying.
It's much easier when we have the reference to go and point to. The next one is a viaduct to I-5, so basically just having traffic. Traffic.
It was a red light, of course. Very expensive.
I know.
Yeah.
I was like, can we just check that?
So this one includes connecting this for this street, connecting Falls Road and Orange Springs, adding activity, and then elevating this over Bloomsbury and Railroad this would be a very large. property.
What, can you go back to that one? What was that exactly?
It's also. It's wanting a connection. The I-5, so.
Instead of.
This
But
intersection.
it takes it.
Okay,
So, yeah. That light that was just, was that south of Freddy's, the one that's right there by the.
And besides the property impacts, I believe it would also be a new I-5. Very difficult and it needs to be closed to the library.
Oh, you were gonna try to connect on the freeway.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, no, that's
Put that
definitely
lower.
too close, but yeah,
that's too
that's way
close to the
too
two
close.
oh five, they never.
Yeah, you can have
Yeah,
Walton, Nyberg, that one, and then
Yeah,
205 all right there.
there's no way to that.
Possibly let us build those stub ramps that go nowhere.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that's what it was saying, it was supposed to be a whole new thing.
Right.
Like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
way?
I think I like the.
Yeah.
Vancouver, we're split up 2 of the 5. No, but that's different than that. Interchange, yeah, it's that close, no way. Yeah.
But, yeah, that. Just.
Oh, yeah. that's-
Okay, so now we have the road under the rail option. Overall, we probably are. So we have essentially maintaining local connections. Similar to Tualatin Sherwood Road over Boone's Ferry with the right in, right out, except we would have a tunnel. And then I think that it would be a little too congested. But we're still looking at it and seeing if there's any variations of it that can do it. And I think also for if we're to move forward with this alternative or a different alternative, we want to look at it.
I think one of the biggest benefits of the roads and alternatives. is How it would help them.
And green space.
There's a few potential benefits there.
Go up at the town.
Yeah, they were talking about it'd have to be a bump,
So it'd still be
Yeah.
kind of elevated.
so it's like a boat. And then have a pump system to keep water out when.
Yeah, even costs similar dollars.
Yeah.
But we're not recommending rules.
They would need to elevate it just to keep water out during normal rains or in a case of a flood situation.
Particularly in flood situation, have to have. Prior flow, stuff report above.
Why is
We have to have,
It would ramp up and go down.
if we start having flood water flowing in. Pumps.
Yeah.
There's possibly some ways to make it work, but I agree. We'd also probably have to look at some kind of system.
Yeah.
There's a lot to look
But I
at.
would just think.
Mike,
Yeah.
I think if you guys are looking at that option and that bump to try to keep water out, the idea to keep it during a 100-year flood or a major flood, when we're already gonna see, I would imagine major flooding to begin with, then the idea of trying to keep that dry, I would think should be thrown out if we're already gonna have flooding everywhere else. Because if you have flooding everywhere else and it's a major flood, then no matter what we do, it's a tunnel.
Yeah. We get back to that.
Yes. Yeah,
I mean, that's gonna happen.
Well, I mean, Mike, if you tell me that we can do that anyway, because Art Nazi, with all the work that we just redid. Next to Freddy's still floods and underneath the little bridge next to Bushwhacker still floods. We just redid a bunch of that. I know, just as regular winter rain.
I think I'm hearing a lot of skepticism about this.
Okay.
I think it's a catch
That's
basin.
south of construction under the railroad, does that require a shoot fly when you go under the railroad if you're gonna build this?
And we can make. Oh, that would be assuming that we could. for.
That would affect the cost.
What was it, did they already have like the idea on how, I know they talked about how high you need to go above the rail, but how low you would go below that?
It was less than putting rail, wasn't it like 22 feet for the rail?
Don't.
Yeah.
That. On our.
I believe 17 feet for standard truck. 5 feet or so for that construction. Going over, he was 30 feet.
Yeah, that's what it was.
25. The problem with that is, well, sure it is the dimension truck. So that's 17.
This ship,
Yeah,
that might function better in our TSP that way, for example, we go down 99 or Day Road.
yeah, it might, but there's some businesses to our west that.
Yeah.
I think it would, if it was just like a thoroughfare, and if it was just off the Sherwood Road going under. It would be a lot easier, but then.
Right.
Having people. Get onto it from other local roads. That's why where you put. Another intersection, how do you get from along Sherwood Road onto? The next one is very similar. We maintain the 89 signal. And then Bolton Sherwood Road goes under, and instead of having the right in, right out, this area, the intersection. Very similar. And then this one is ramps at Bolton Sherwood Road. This one was also very unique. It mainly prioritized traffic to and from I-5, and then this was the local connection. So this one's right now.
People are just trying to take out the dump.
It's just so close to the intersection that anything in here, like at least with this property, there's just a little bit more open space. And the hope is that we're hoping, ideally, some property owners in that area are looking to develop. You know. The next one, Mike had already touched on, taking the railroad over 12 from Sherwood Road and transferring 12 from Sherwood Road at grade. This is the one that you mentioned. So essentially a new railroad while work is done, and then we would like to also to raise West Station. So we can
And have it go down in time before it's going over to go under the other one.
Bridge just on the north side.
It would have a lot of confidence.
So UPRR had suggestions, right? Should it?
That's why it's red.
I'm sure it did.
Yeah,
It's red for a reason.
Okay.
Cool.
And then
some railroad representatives actually wanted to start with this. So I think we're separate. I think after talking more about it, it's really other thing. Change of mind.
another issue with this one is if you're going through here without a train, you may notice that even if there's not a train, there is still congestion. So you're paying a lot of money just to take away the rail conflict and cost, but it's also very traffic issues.
Yeah.
Yes. This one, the slide was actually in the wrong spot. We actually went over that rate. It's like, then these were kind of the two stragglers that we had. So improving day road connections, and that's just out of scope for this project. And then Southern Oregon 99 West to I-5. So don't remember every single one we just went over. The green are the ones that we are currently still analyzing. Any questions right now that.
Think of it at the time, so.
I've got
Oh, you're ready then.
two questions for you. Any Tualatin Road over Boone's Ferry and railway track, would that be built on fill, or are you looking at some kind of elevated structure option?
Either one would be possible.
Okay. So if you don't build it on fill, if it's elevated, and Tualatin Sherwood goes over Boone's Ferry, what happens to the old Tualatin Sherwood that's under the new Tualatin Sherwood Road? Would that be vacated?
Good question. I think we use. If Baltic Shore goes on over, I would imagine some of that space would be for walking by the connections. And others of it would still need to be right away because of the grade on it.
Sure.
But
Maybe usable right away, temporarily usable right away.
yeah, and there could be options for things that are.
Okay, well, that's, the pictures, the graphics seem to be filled, but you've answered a structure as possible. So that's my first question. But going back to the very beginning, where you've indicated that over the years, this is the epicenter of issues, safety or timing or whatever. So cost benefit, on the cost side of things, it's going to be fairly straightforward to figure out how much the project's going to cost, plus the displacement of businesses and acquisition of property and so forth. So that's the cost. And I think we could all probably agree this ain't going to be cheap. So how do you intend to measure the benefits to satisfy the public that either the cost is worth the benefits or it isn't? That what we have here to live with is really something we just have to put up with. How are you going to measure the benefits?
Another big question. Perhaps some tools that the state uses to look at basically the cost to society actions. All about. I think also we can look at production. So I would. There's always some solutions to those. Before we get to some sort of if you do this, how to get the page that place.
Happy to hear there's a way to quantify or put a metric on the safety. For me personally, though, it's this time issue you talk about hours. I think we could go on with the stopwatch right now and determine how long it takes to get eastbound, westbound, northbound, southbound with the existing configuration. All of these have a lot of out of direction travel. Right? And I'm trying in my mind to figure out how I'm going to save any time. With right now, I know how long it takes to turn left or right from Boone's Ferry onto Tualatin Sherwood. I can't, in my mind, intuitively say that any of these out of direction ways are going to save me any time. They all look to me like they're going to add time and frustration for my traveling through town. And I would hope that for the public's sake, when we present this for review, that we have some kind of matrix that, like right now, it takes X seconds to turn eastbound from a northbound Boone's Ferry. It takes so long. And the alternative to go Warm Springs and then down the new road or all the way to Martinazzi and make that turn takes X amount of seconds. And show where it's green and red, where it's better or worse than the existing movement time. If you talk about hours, I'm thinking minutes at best, if not just seconds. And I'm thinking it's probably gonna take more time to get through these configurations than just sitting there right now, waiting for cycles to go through, especially when a fire truck goes through and jams up the whole thing, and then it's rebooting itself. But anyway, I hope for the public's sake, the costs are gonna be easy to show, that the benefits or not benefits are clearly shown as well.
Yeah, we'll work with our consultant.
Because this is very complicated, and yeah, this,
I think some of them are quantifying the change in crash rates or travel time. A little bit easier. Some of them are going to be really hard. Changes in walkability. Yeah, livability.
Sure. Yeah.
Also things like traffic that's back road, like taking minutes.
we're gonna hear a lot of that. Make a toll road out of it, we'll hear all kinds of things, you know.
Yeah, so I think there'd be some things that'll be harder to quantify.
Sure.
But there are some that
It's, for me personally, it would be the time saving thing that I would look at. Or this is gonna take me longer to go that way, then I'm gonna look for an alternative that keeps me moving.
Also, this first phase, like this study that we're doing right now, is kind of getting at what we're talking about in a more general sense of, does the city want to pursue a grade separated option? Do we want to, or do we want to pursue at grade options? Or do we want to back off? And that's why we're checking with you guys multiple times. Council. And then even, this is a 10-year project. Future phases could also be looking at, is this something we should do? Is it worth it?
And we also have to take into account population growth, parking space, stuff like that within the time frame.
Here are 15 people that showed up on the chart you made. It says that livability and safety were important, and I think I had heard a bunch of things for access on the south side of town to get to the river. And for people to be able to walk around downtown, because everyone just runs around the lake and they can't go anywhere because they're trapped in that little corner. So I understand that the cars have priority and so do the trucks to get where they're going. But livability was 11 out of your 15 people. So pretend that has a number.
Talking about bike and pedestrian access across Wall and Sherwood, I'm with you. So
Trying to cross that road.
it's a deterrent to be around the bike.
And it's so frustrating because there's so many things in those parking lots you'd love to get to.
Yeah.
Except you gotta park on one side, go somewhere else, or like when the regatta runs down here, same deal.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but touch on Randy's point about time spent. It seems to me like the primary goal of all of these different things is just to separate through traffic entirely. Just reduce the amount for that. It's competing with local traffic to get through that intersection. Route everything is going through very straight, and anything else peeled out at multiple points instead of everybody having funnel through the same
Which is part
intersection.
of the reason I like the
Yeah.
under option, because it allowed traffic to just move and created a safe green space for just in town above. And it also kept the beautiful views we have in town.
It's good ways to reduce time travel within Tualatin to get all that other extra travel. Let's keep it from competing with us.
I would not discount the impact on the country. You know, a lot of people satisfy the city. Those through travelers along the Wilsonville and Portland and Sherwood and Lake Oswego. Here's about half.
Everyone that's fighting with them to try and get off that intersection.
I think one of these plans that are a model.
I would like to add on to what everything's saying, and as we look through those alternatives, and we're looking at that to really focus in on the impacts to the local area, like we were talking about. And when we were mentioning livability, it was kind of what are the impacts of an elevated road from if I'm own McDonald's or I own businesses across the street, now I have an overpass in my back.
Or a 30-foot concrete barrier right there.
Yes, exactly. So that, and then as we're talking about the turns, so if we're looking at right now, it's only one turn to go from Boonesbury to Tualatin Sherwood or vice versa. So with those raising or lowering the roads, we're throwing in additional turns there for all of those. That's at least tripling the amount of turns that will take you to access those roads from that. So that's going to be, Randy, like you're talking about, that will definitely be an increase, and I don't see that any other way that there would be a decrease in time that it takes you to go from Boone's Ferry Road to Tualatin Sherwood Road, or vice versa with that. The other thing when we're talking about reductions in traffic is we also discuss the idea of when we only deal with this intersection there, we're kicking the can down the road to the other intersections. I don't know if we can pull up a map of the area.
I agree. One of the ones that
Just
came,
of the study here.
one of the conversations that came up at the meeting was how it will, the bottleneck might move back to Martinazi.
Or the post office road.
So kicking the can down the road, yeah, to Martinazi, to the Fred Meyers intersection, or we call it the New Seasons intersection. I don't know which of those takes priority, but and then again, like I say, the I-5 with that. So if those intersections are all still red, and we're talking about just traffic coming out of Sherwood, cut through, that they're hit and they're bottled up at, we're still gonna, no matter what, we still have to add an intersection here to take the Boone's Ferry traffic onto Tualatin Sherwood Road. So we're still adding an intersection to this. So it's still an additional light to address that, unless we did that right in, right out. I think that's the only option that doesn't add lights. The only way that would remove an intersection is the right in. So the I think again, that's an important thing to get out of the study. Is like, will there actually be any reductions in traffic, or in this? Is it just like, well, you can quickly go across this intersection, but we still actually had cars backed up over this bridge because they're stuck at Martinazi, they're stuck at the new intersection. They still had, and vice versa, is traffic on the 5 still backed up, or traffic coming from Nyberg Way or whatever, still backed up because they're still stuck at these other intersections going through. And then when you're going westbound, as soon as you pass that last intersection, then it opens up. You still have this bottleneck through the majority of our downtown area. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what we do, like some of the options that we're thinking of could extend further to my math.
Yeah.
If we do that, the next backup would probably so be able to sort of depend on the traffic before we get back to that level.
If coming from Boone's Ferry onto Tualatin Sherwood, there was a right only turn lane for all the people that live in that part of Tualatin commute. It could make that third lane for Martinazi there and allow people to merge on like highway and extend that to make it easier for people getting to 5. And also make that intersection less congested, because a good chunk of people are turning right on that intersection in the morning to get to work. So that's a big flow of traffic.
That's one of the part of the what could be
It's calculated the time lost due to the train crossing. It feels like that may be kind of part of like when the trains cross, how much that's causing the backup on the road. That feels like that piece of what you're showing the people is that when the train happens, this is what, you know, the decrease in people. The capacity increase that much or decrease that much, or if you come up with a calculation on that, like the train's effect on the traffic, that would help.
Yeah, I observed the one instance right around lunchtime, 4-minute long train. The downtime is about 6 minutes. So it's about 30 minutes for 12 to show really on that. I would 10 minutes. After the turn on,
Yeah, see, that's exactly what I'm talking about, but I think part of the reason this intersection is even more than like, we're talking about the other ones backing up, but this one works because of the train, and so that's the whole point, so I think if you could add some numbers like that to present to people, then people will kind of get the picture of the train situation a little bit more, understand. I definitely noticed that too, like when the train is like, you're something's good.
And we're talking about the train, it's not.
I'm talking about the train itself, so that's
Yeah,
part of the
not
whole reason
less.
this intersection is such a big
Yeah.
deal, right? Is because like, yes, we have all those other problems, you're totally right about the other intersection back
Yeah.
up. But if you want to talk about why this intersection is so important and make the case to the public, I think we need data on what the train's doing to the
And
traffic.
both the train and west, because
Yes.
they're two separate.
Yes, train and west, they are two separate things for
Yeah.
sure, because west is way faster, but the train, yeah, I've had friends get stuck for very long. Mostly in Lake Oswego, but this one can get tricky too, so I think that would be my encouragement, find some data on that, see how that will.
We're working so really on and trying to, and Washington County, there's signals with our consultant. It wasn't on the analysis. Of all the train data.
So, perfect, yeah.
Another thing I noticed with going through the intersection, the light does not correspond with working in a functional way with the train. Because I've been through other train intersections where, okay, train's coming, these people can go because they're not going past the train. And the light changes to allow continued flow traffic while the train is closed. That way, when it goes back, you don't have a backup on half of the intersection. You just have to fix the one problem. And our lights don't do that.
Yeah.
You just, it continues where it's at and everyone's stopped. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually a city-owned signal. So very remnant from Washington.
I saw it go on Boone's Ferry the other day, but maybe it wasn't enough.
Yeah, so
It doesn't adjust.
we've got a different project going on, working on signals. There's a adaptive signal coordination system in place. in most of the towns.
This the intersection, but
Yeah. Unfortunately, that particular system doesn't work very well. Very much. So we're looking at this system. It also has some other issues, the reasons why we're looking to replace it. I need to manage expectations. We are not going to get green light everywhere.
Well, of course not. Somebody has to have a red light if somebody has a green light.
it's on, anybody's on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
so
makes
we
it
are
better.
looking to update our signals downtown.
I'll think of you next time.
That's true, you gotta watch that.
I was stumped by 282 when I first saw it here. Now, a question for you, is it a tunnel all the way? From, I guess, around Dutch Brothers all the way to the new street there by Bushwhackers, or is it just a tunnel under the railroad track and Boone's Ferry and then kind of an open causeway with a high wall for flood control and some bridges for pedestrian crossing?
That could be either.
Well, that's interesting, then if you can, yeah.
It's those little, like, bracket lines kind of on either side.
I didn't understand those, yeah,
Those would be the entrance and exit.
but it's not necessarily a tunnel all the way, you're not boring all the way from one of those brackets to the other.
Not
Yeah,
Like the graduate one.
Make all of that extra space just pedestrian.
What they were looking at doing for the tunnel option.
oh, I see, oh, okay, gotcha, okay. Gotcha, okay.
At the meeting where they had everybody putting their ideas for this, they had, the sheets had a nice little marker of how wide the ramp would need to be for either cars or the train to go under. So everybody was marking, okay, this is the length that it would be deeper.
Okay, okay.
To know how deep it needed to be for realistic grade.
Mike, one of the things I remember when we were doing the TSP that, Robert, who's on that TriMet board, had brought up I think we asked why West was still operating. So when was there, what's on that? Because all these other cuts happened with transit, why was West not on that? So we had brought up that West has got either a lease or basically a term that you can't shut it down until this date. Can we get that information? to have with that is that basically, I don't know if it was like a lease with this, and it's like that agreement that basically like you have West till this time frame and it will operate all the way. But when that, I thought that during that time, he said it could have been an additional 40 years, 30 or 40 years that had left on it. So if we could find that out, that would be helpful to know that like this is the end of, or this is when West expires in theory, or the next time changes can be made. And
I'm
is
pretty
West
sure
service
Justin's
renewed?
right. They only recently started and they made a big contract with PRR for those times. That's why they could only be at those times. And even though they wanted priority, they didn't manage to get priority. So if there was a train, West still had to wait. So I think what he's saying sounds familiar because they bought time on the track.
I think,
Instead of building a new track.
yeah, we'll call counterpart to try that. I think it was a requirement from the federal fund.
They couldn't build new track at Bridgeport or there, so they were like, well, shit.
So that would be it, like the federal contracts, like we give you federal dollars, you gotta operate this thing for the next so many years. So if we know when that time frame is, and then what the feasibility is, if anybody's willing to like say that openly, but what the feasibility really is of West continuing based off of its ridership, because at that point too, I mean, if it's doing that feasibility, we'll see like what is ridership on it, what's projected ridership. And then, I mean, that alone should be part of our downtown plan, stuff like that. Like how it ties in with West build.
We'll get some looks like.
Yeah.
A lot of really insightful comment.
The engineer from Fiddleson seemed fairly confident that there are still continuing, even in this administration, federal funds available for improving railroad crossings. So that, okay, now that's important to consider too about going under railroad tracks. If this solves whatever railroad issues the federal government is concerned about, that could have some impact on getting this done.
Yeah, there's a lot of money available for eliminating railroad crossings.
Yeah.
And I think the safety benefits of the travel plan, it sells on both sides of the aisle. So they continue to be available. I anticipate it will. How would fail?
Maybe we could get a little advance to replace the active crossing on Williams Ferry up there towards Golden. It's really that big difference.
Oh my God, so much work. If no one's told you that. I'm gonna practice like this.
I've gotten a few calls about it. The railroad is actually placed out. They're gonna actually have to shut it down.
Well, they replaced it 3 summers ago and it's back.
Like, we have a date for the virtual open house and plan your next steps.
Way too honest.
And so some of our next steps coming up,
Yeah.
we got everyone at the table. Next thing's happening will be a virtual open house we anticipate starting in August. That'll have more of the options that were suggested and more evaluation on this. Try to work with a consultant, put the numbers. After that, it'll be narrowly that down. I think depending on how the process goes, you know, it's not great. We'll just we'll have a lot of meetings. And we'll be back here mid-September. And then we'll actually have a joint meeting, planning commission, and city council. City management. That's the trigger fix.
That's kind of pretty big. Oh, they did, they said that, they said it. You're like, wait a minute, that's not.
They did, they said it to us.
Okay.
After that, if we get to a preferred alternative and it's something sizable, the next step would be I think the question is.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for this really great insightful comments. Thank you for your thoughts on this. We really welcome any other thoughts you'd like to add. Please feel free to call. Please continue to get involved with the virtual open house. Look forward to seeing you in a couple months for our next discussion.
Thank you.
Mike, I would add that it would improve pedestrian safety with the bridge over. I was able to experience that. You asked us to go down there and look at that, kind of project in your mind what it would look like. So I did that crossing Tualatin Sherwood Road, almost got hit by a car there that was turning left. I made sure it was my walk sign. I'm going to park, but I'm trying to picture in my mind. I'm like, the bridge would have, and I heard a car squealing as it was like slamming on its brakes on the railroad tracks. And there's a younger guy in the car, a little car. It's like, whoop, he ran the left and it's like, oh my gosh, well, look at that. What are the odds? I'm hit by a car crossing that road. And you know what I thought? A bridge over would have eliminated that left turning car at that intersection.
You were almost a statistic for the study you
I
were
know.
studying.
Absolutely, right? I could have been the poster child for Black Bag.
Built a bridge in your memory.
I all of them have a lot of that fight.
Totally right. Yeah.
When I first moved here, I think I ran into that intersection twice and then I said, I don't enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah.
And bringing headlight there is not our plant garden.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Thank you both.
Yeah.
All right, we're good. Do we need a break?
Stretch.
Yes, okay. Break. Yeah. 5 minutes, we'll come back at 8:05.
Very
Yeah,
good.
I mean, nice job on the reservoir. Cap on this one. Cap on the reservoir.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I loved it. You were living this.
Immemorial.
I went to.
Like point for me.
I think the only thing you know is one of the things I would try to guess.
I got to get down and watch the baby from Graham Scurry Road too. Oh, yeah. Until they got him to be a shovel. I was just watch. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Actually, played.
Oh, no. Yeah.
They were okay. No, I'm glad it's research. I watched those trucks. Oh, dude. Yeah, someday it'll happen, but, yeah, for sure, yeah.
Unlimited funding has a tendency to solve problems.
Yeah.
I call it a
Raise
race.
the entire whole area, 20, 10, all the roads underground.
We know what we're talking about.
Oh, boy. Yeah. Be the new Boston.
Yes.
Jesus.
That's the first time I've seen it.
Just have this all figured out, you know. Don't you study these diagrams?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I know, that's why I thought it was funny. I was like, hey, why am I remember?
Yeah.
Definitely violate every
Yeah.
federal standard for.
Yeah. I didn't realize that was supposed to.
They are, we're not.
So is that an option? Because.
Okay, I love it, just in case, cool, yeah. Let's just talk about that. Yeah. It's not what I know, I know.
I was told to expect to be here till 10.
Oh, that's very good. Yeah, but it would be extended, it's just talking about all. It's the first session, try to figure this out. Okay, I think we're all back, so we're snack, everybody got a drink or snack? Okay, we're ready for our third action item on the agenda, the staff presentation, introduction. Project to establish new regulations for food park pods. The planning commission will be asked for direction on policy questions. So just direction on policy. Okay.
Great, thank you. Is everybody excited to talk about food park products? Okay, for the record, my name is Erin Ingber. I'm the senior planner here at the city of Tualatin, and tonight I'll be introducing a draft framework for regulations for food park pods. So at the end of my presentation, the commission will have an opportunity to discuss the policy questions and provide some direction to staff so that we can return with some final code for you to consider, provide a recommendation to council on. Okay, and with that, for tonight's presentation, we'll go over some background information. We'll look at Tualatin's current standards, which are largely directed at individual food carts. We'll review our draft code regulations that are being proposed. These were kind of a compilation of best practices we found from the region. We looked at Sherwood, Tigard, Beaverton, and Happy Valley. Thank you. So we'll be looking at where we propose food carts should be allowed, the application process, the various design standards, and then we'll wrap it up with some policy conversation and next steps. So as background, food cart pods have become an increasingly common business model and community gathering space, and we've seen them pop up in surrounding communities, and a lot of surrounding communities are ahead of the game with us. But we do know that they are a good economic driver to activate underutilized parking lots and commercial property. And the purpose of this project is to develop clear, predictable standards that can support economic opportunity while also ensuring to remain compatible with surrounding development. So there's a few principles that led to the timeliness of this project, particularly the Council 2030 vision identified an action item to revisit the food cart policy and provide some clarification. We initiated this conversation last year. We returned in April for a work session and received some direction from City Council that I'll get into later. We also did a downtown identity study, which found overwhelming community interest in a food cart pod, particularly downtown near the parks. And the study also found that a food cart pod would support a few different identity frameworks, mainly that it would encourage circulation between our Greenway Trail system, the Niagara Woods Mall, and our downtown area, and kind of activate that whole corridor to bring bodies down to our downtown and kind of have a livelier presence than what we currently have. We've also seen some market interest from developers. I think we've been approached by 7 developers that are interested interested in our market, so, I think we'll be in a good position once we get this code adopted to think about it. So when we were considering what kind of draft codes standards to incorporate into this proposal, we weighed out some benefits and potential concerns. The idea was that we wanted the code to be permissive enough to encourage flexibility in creative design, but not so permissive that they pop up everywhere and kind of become a nuisance with some of the surrounding developments. So as you can see, they are good for small business incubation and entrepreneurship. They will expand dining options in Tualatin. A lot of chain restaurants and we need more interesting food options, so that would be a great benefit to add to the community. And we wanted to encourage flexible standards that would bring redevelopment of vacant or underutilized sites into fruition. So we kind of looked around at some food cart plot examples and found that they vary in size with the number of food carts and also in acreage. Some have built covered indoor-outdoor areas for people to sit. Others are an adaptive reuse of existing buildings. So with that in mind, we tried to build in that flexibility with our proposal. We also talked to the developers of the Happy Valley Station and the Wilson Brewing, so we took some of their feedback and guidance into consideration too, which we'll get into later.
Can I add one thing on the Oregon City one? That's two food cart pods next to each other. There's that line and right across the street.
Oh,
Yes,
okay. I haven't actually been there yet.
yeah. So they're both basically very different food carts in all of them, of course, but very similar. So it's like double the size.
Okay.
And that is the one.
Similar to a repurposing like they did in Oregon City with that brewery in Canby, they repurposed the old library and
Okay.
turned it into it. So they're reusing buildings, which will help.
Okay, and I think it's the same developer. Yeah.
Yeah.
So looking at Tualatin's current standards, food carts are largely prohibited from operating in our central commercial zones. And when they are permitted, they're limited to individual food carts on individual sites. The exception being the Basalt Creek Employment Zone. We do allow food cart pods there, but it is limited to lots that front on Grams Ferry, and it would be limited to one development.
One pod development in the entire district.
In the, Basalt Creek Employment Zone area.
Okay.
And part of the reason is because it's employment land, so it's protected under Title IV. We can get into the specifics of that later if you're interested, but we'll just keep chugging right along. If you have questions, let me know. For our proposal, we have these proposed definitions where we wanted to go with the common nomenclature of food cart over the state nomenclature of mobile food unit. This is what our approach was. And then when we were considering what constitutes a food cart pod, we decided to keep it simple and go with a site containing 2 or more food carts and letting the market decide what they can make pencil for food cart pod development. We did hear from council that they want certain venues included in food cart pod. For that, and some calls coming up. But when we were looking around town and taking council's direction to focus in the commercial areas, we're proposing to allow food cart pods in general commercial, central commercial, which is our downtown, office commercial, mixed use commercial, which is up by Bridgeport, neighborhood commercial, which is down by Plantback Gardens, and as we discussed, Salt Creek Employment, which is also down in the Salt Creek area. And then we'll retain our existing regulations for individual food carts so that they can continue to operate in the industrial areas.
Does that map say that we wouldn't have a food cart pod near the hospital or downtown or the high school or anywhere?
So in those areas, an individual food cart would be able to operate,
Not a pod, but cart.
right? So the closest we would get a pod to the high school under this proposal would be down. So laser pointer, there's a,
Where the hospital, yeah. Yeah. The
might see a
hospital
small sliver.
There's one right there across from the hospital.
on the hill.
Isn't that sacred?
Side of blue, that's past the. Well, wait, is that up in the corner where?
Let's go on.
Anyway, okay.
I'm
Yeah.
noticing no blue where I would think that that would make sense in my first thought would be.
So my pointer wasn't working,
Oh,
but
sorry.
thank you. This area is fairly close to the
Yeah, that's right.
hospital.
Okay, okay. Maybe.
And then down here, that's fairly close
Okay.
to the high school, but otherwise they'd be able to have an
Individual, just,
It's a fair comment, way down the road.
yeah, probably like that.
Yeah, that's south of
That's where it is.
You just drive all the way into Tualatin right now to get their eats and they deal with a bunch of traffic and get back. So-
Part of the plus with food cart access is to not have to drive, is
Yeah.
walkability.
And one of our questions later on is this zoning proposal appropriate? So
Oh, cool, yeah.
we can
Yeah.
dive into
We'll
that.
hold off then. And just, I mean, just to clarify, it's reflecting where those zones currently are. So it's not new zones for commercial use, just what.
Right. So you're not gonna put food carts in residential zones and everything existing around the schools all residential.
And we proposed various application processes. We found that there's a lot of variation in neighboring jurisdictions about how they review the park development. So our goal was to propose processes that feel proportional to the development impacts. So this would range from type 1 review to type 3. So for the P and Z option type 1 review, this would be available to modifications to an existing food cart pod that do not increase the number of carts on site. So say they wanted to add an accessory storage building or maybe a fire pit or some other amenity. That would be available for a type 1 review, which is a staff level decision that does not require pre-application meeting or public notice. The next tier and probably the most common would be the type 2 review. This would apply to new food cart pods, which would be considered 2 carts or more, and modifications to an existing food cart pod that increases the number of carts on site. Again, this would be a staff level decision. It would require the application meeting and it would also require the public notice. And then the next step is the type 3 conditional use permit. This would be considered for large food cart pods, which we put at 20 or more carts. Again, there was variation among neighboring jurisdictions. In talking to our development stakeholders, they said that they typically consider large food carts 15 or more. We wanted to, I guess, leave a door open to make a larger or like medium to large size food cart console without coming to the planning commission. But considering the impact that a large food cart pod, how we thought that a conditional use permit review would be appropriate. And again, at the end, we'll be asking back if this application is appropriate or if you have any back for staff. Okay.
Anybody know? Rick?
Okay. Sure, well, that's a good break.
Here. So under our proposal, we are looking to consider food cart pods and food carts in the same category as the existing eating and drinking establishment category in our code. We felt that the characteristics of a food cart or food cart pod is similar to the characteristics listed here, where we're selling food and or beverages to the public for on-site consumption or takeaway service. Thank you. So now we'll transition into the proposed design standards. We are first going to review our proposed setbacks, and these are to ensure compatibility with the surrounding context. So first, we're looking to have a 10-foot setback from property lines abutting the street. The idea was that it's near enough to activate the street and be visible to the street and have a presence, but also provide some flexibility for landscaping and public easements. And then we also propose 5 feet from side and rear lot lines, just to keep with the context of surrounding commercial development. And when a food cart pod is located adjacent to a residential zone, we propose a 20-foot setback to provide that additional mitigative measure along with some screening. It will be in the form of a continuous hedge or cedar fence. And then within the development, it would be a 5-foot setback from food cart pods or other structures, right? I mean, food carts or other structures. And we also propose some standards just to help with the on-site circulation so that if there's queuing outside of the service windows, it won't impede connectivity on the public sidewalk or compete with loading areas, maybe 2 parking lots or things of that nature. And then just a height standard for canopies to ensure people can navigate under them safely.
Would the screening be required only for residential?
Under the current proposal, yeah. Next slide, please. For this, we're requiring certain amenities. We heard from our council that they definitely wanted to see a plumbed restroom building to bring that destination feel. And they wanted an area for covered seating of the nature of our weather. This is what staff's proposing. For the covered seating area or pavilion, we left it fairly open-ended just to encourage creativity and flexibility. I know I've been to some food cart pods that do really cool things where they use like storage containers or maybe have like those parasail covers. But we'd be curious to get your thoughts on maybe how prescriptive we should be with the standard. If we want to leave it fairly flexible, or if we want to have a meaning to certain design standards or prescriptive measures.
The restroom for car.
Yeah, and again, the idea is that the market would then right size their development to accommodate the cost of that infrastructure. In talking to our stakeholder groups, they said that around 12 carts would likely be needed to make that pencil.
How close together do cards have to be set up before it's on?
How do you define the site that has the
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
So it would be on one lot with these amenity buildings or structures. So the restroom building, the covered seating area. And then the food carts could be arranged in a manner to suit the developer as long as they need to set back.
Right, so that's for set up intentional food cart pod, but like in the other areas of the map that weren't blue, if 2 food carts set up, how close would they have to be before that would be a violation?
Like if they're on separate lots, there's a lot line.
Okay.
Separating it. No, I'm.
So they could be within 15 feet of each other, but as long as one is on one side of that line and one on the
I'm
other.
just clarifying your question.
Just,
That-
yeah, sort of my question is, if you have 2 separate carts that aren't necessarily affiliated, whatever else, they set up in a gray area where a single cart is permitted But a pod isn't a pod being defined as 2 or more food carts. How close to it would they have to be before you would consider that to be an unsafe pod rather than just 2 separate food carts set up in an area?
Look at how the fire, right, you're allowed one site, and I think we look at that.
Right, yeah, I don't really get into it with this presentation, but largely what we're looking to do is to start with the code and then move those into the development code so that they have some standards easier to find. So we would have our standards for individual for development, so as long as they all have those individual lots and approvable under our code, in theory, we could have one part on one lot, and another part on the top of that lot or adjacent to that lot.
That's Lori saying, I always think it's probably not a lot and parcel and site, and if those are all high and clearly, then I'm okay with the code, that rattles around.
Yeah, I think in this case, we can use those principles.
Aaron, I would say regarding the covered seating area, I would add a little bit more description of what would not be included as a covered seating area or not meet that definition. So is a portable canopy going to meet that? Because when you were describing some of the shade structures that use different materials and stuff there are some that are really nice that are more permanent in nature and things that technically all those things trigger building permits. Anything over 6 month period is going to need that. So maybe it's to say that structures that trigger building permits or shade.
Well, maybe
Ultimately, if you're putting up a shade structure or a
yeah, maybe
barrier
our
structure,
verbiage
it's a
should
building permit.
water to prevent to make it water safe is what you're trying to do versus shade.
Well,
Okay, is that what we're saying?
A permanent cover.
Well, permanent, but like covered could be like gazebo type thing, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm talking, so if we want it to be rainproof or not rainproof, but what would be the word? Yes, like saving the elements or something.
so that is the question, is that if you want something that is to provide an element thing there. I was more, I guess, going towards aesthetics that like the tents that you pop up or pop-ups
Or whatever.
and things like that, or even the large tents that kind of come up for the fairs and stuff like that. Those do pop up in a lot of food cart pods across the city. We use them in in Portland a lot to get out of the requirement to pull a building permit. So they're temp permit tents. So if you say that it cannot be a temporary tent to meet that required the building area or something along those lines. But if you guys are saying that it should be something that is also, because you can do a full permit for a shade structure that I think is going to be a little bit different underneath the building code. When you're going for something that's like a solid tent, it's going to have to be engineered if you want that thing out for longer than 6 months. Which means it's going to be nice. It's not going to be.
Yeah, it would be nice.
Junk,
Yeah,
so.
I agree with you on that for sure.
Those aren't meant to train. So I guess I think of a food truck as transient and a food pod is permanent.
Yeah, but I still think Justin's right. I think we should say something to make it something more permanent.
Yep.
I would say something that makes it, versus shade, I would like to do.
Right.
Rain. You can actually say dry underneath. Just in case somebody gets creative. Yeah.
They will get creative.
Yeah.
Food cart pods for
What
sure.
crossed my mind when I read that was that one photo you have, like umbrellas on the picnic tables. I thought, okay, is that what a covered seating area is?
Well, yeah, so I think some context here, these are great points and it's getting me thinking about how we can strengthen this. But the way the proposed code is written, the keyword is structure, and then we have a definition of structure in our development code, which would imply a building permit might be required. I can't remember the definition verbatim, but it's something along the lines of that which must be constructed or edifice composed of parts joined together. So in my mind, that definition would likely include like a Costco canopy or something like that being utilized. But I think your point is well taken that we would probably how this is written.
I do feel like the pods I've been to where they have slightly better cover areas are much.
just a little strict on that one.
Also, with the one that you were talking about with just seeing the umbrellas, the Beaverton cartel. Also, like that's their outdoor area. They also have a completely closed-in building for people.
Yeah, that's the thing, I think it's quite a bit fun in and out, but.
You're already having to put foundation down somewhere.
And then we just have some general design standards to, again, encourage high quality development while also providing some flexibility. So these just talk about how the carts must be on a paved surface. Largely, this is just to encourage accessibility to all users. And that the food carts themselves be kept in good repair. We also are going to propose requiring storage buildings, or that all storage be in either the cart or a completely enclosed accessory building. We incorporate some flexibility so that the developer can maybe choose to do it in a manner that would not require a building permit, or if they wanted to build a larger enclosed accessory storage area, that would be permitted too.
Does and I'm assuming that the code language itself does not mean that that bathroom is going to fall into that detached structure or to that. Would not be included in that, so the bathroom's not one of two. So you could have 2 storage beds and a bathroom.
So I think there's maybe some possibility where it could be an extended building where you have the restroom facility and then maybe it's flanked by some storage. Or has a storage door component. Again, we were trying to right size our standards so that they were flexible, that they can do these different components in a manner that suits their development or their site, but also require that we check certain boxes.
Yeah.
But if you have any feedback or would like to see anything in particular.
Well, just if they were building a bathroom facility, then would that still allow them, would have to have a bathroom facility, but would that count as one of the structures? So you still get a bathroom and 2 structures. The main thing with this is so that, like what a lot of big cart pots like to do, they're like, I need additional area, so they start putting up these little bitty plastic storage sheds all over the place.
Yeah, and one of the things we were trying to avoid was allowing this option, but these would be identified in addition to the restroom building. So
Yeah.
we can either make this an extension of the restroom building or have the restroom building and then up to 2 storage shed or building.
Well, the county and OHA already have a whole bunch of rules about what you can put in the shed. It's not food, it's not dishes, it's not clean, it's not stuff. They've already got all that. I'm assuming we're making them get a Washington County permit.
Yes, they'll have to comply with the county health rules. Good point. And then continuing on the general design standards, we wanted to ensure that bicycle parking would be provided, that on-site lighting and illumination would be provided, but not glare onto abutting properties or the right of way. We also include provisions that trash and recycling receptacles must be provided, and also requiring shared waste and recyclable enclosure is required for all commercial development. And lastly, we have some signage standards where the individual food carts would be limited to signs on the base of the food cart. And then when permitted, we could consider a monument sign or a pole sign for the pod overall. And then we have a bundle of proposed standards that address on-site circulation. The first one is the best practice used in many of our surrounding jurisdictions, just to ensure that no impediments to pedestrian emergency access or vehicle access to improve the property. The next standard is something that we crafted and proposed ourselves. We found that when there is a loading component or an on-site parking component, there could be conflicts between the vehicle movements, thinking that they're allowed in certain areas of the food park pod and really they shouldn't be. So we're proposing the areas where vehicle movements shouldn't be allowed. We would have some removable or retractable bollards to have a visual indication of, where cars are allowed and where they're not allowed. So these could be removed for emergency access or waste collection with standard building procedures. A standard to protect our public access easement, and the customer amenity should be served by a 5-foot wide pedestrian walkway. Largely, I think that will just be included by the nature that it must be on the surface anyway. But in case they do something creative, we wanted to ensure that we would have those pedestrian options. And then to round things out for utilities, because we heard from council that they want this to be a destination site and we're requiring a plumbed restroom, we're looking at making sure that the individual food carts connect to our city services. And largely this would be through utility pedestals, which are similar to what RV parks use. So that way they are connecting to city sewer, water, and electricity. And then we also talked to Clean Water Services about how to write best practice for interceptor facilities to collect the fat soils and greases that businesses produce. So we got some direction there. And then lastly, our engineering group wanted to include a standard about metering. So we're proposing to build a master meter and then additional sub metering may be considered. And we talked with some stakeholders and received some general feedback from them. They were kind of curious why we weren't considering food cart pods in the industrial and employment zones, as was kind of previously mentioned. That's largely because we're allowing individual food carts to continue to operate there, and also because of Metro's titles to protect industrial land. They didn't have any comments about our proposed commercial zones, which I think is good news. For the application process, we had one stakeholder who shared their preference that they just permitted by right under zoning. 12 cities really operate under that model. I know some cities have that model, but because we're updating that, I would propose different types to review this. We've had some questions about how we landed on 2 or more food carts qualifies as a pod. And then we got into some discussion that the stakeholders shared that 2 to 5 carts probably wouldn't provide a destination feel, and that they would recommend 8 carts or more to kind of land at that destination field. But again, the staff perspective was just to keep it flexible and let the developers decide what's right for them and submit an application for our review. We heard that lending can be a challenge when a conditional use permit is required. So then we were trying to right size what would be considered a large food cart pod. And we kind of thought that, if they're looking to get 20 food carts, they may have already done a few investments where they have enough assets where they could fund this themselves and go for the conditional use permit. We also heard if a street plan was necessary because it's an additional cost for them. Staff was leaning or prefers asking for the street plan, mainly because when on-site parking may not be considered, it would be useful to see if there is on-street parking nearby or what parking lots might be available nearby to consider if the joint use or shared use parking. So it would help us kind of assess the neighborhood vicinity, what pedestrian connections are available, if it might need that for some improvements to strengthen those connections after the site. So that's why we decided to continue to push on that street plan. And again, we shared with them what we heard from our council regarding the classroom building. And then they shared their feedback that they think 12 carts would be able to support the cost of that infrastructure. And originally we had a draft standard requiring skirting around the food cart just to preclude them from putting storage underneath the food cart. But we've heard that that can hinder their ability to clean over there, and sometimes they get some nuisance or vermin. So because we're encouraging the accessory storage building for outdoor to put outdoor storage, we just decided to remove that skirting requirement. And lastly, we talked to them about their typical hours of operation because we're considering the need to have a standard when it comes into residential. But in talking to them, we found that their hours of operation are largely compatible with our residential uses. That was really kind of wraps up my overview of our design standards. So we can revisit our policy questions. Feedback on the proposed zoning districts feel appropriate for food park development. And if our application process is proportional to the scale of development and becoming feedback for us. And generally what we think about our design standards.
Oh, yeah.
Shared like concerns, trash and noise and so forth. Is that why the council didn't like to have the zone before, or was there some other reason? Competition with the other kinds of restaurants or?
What I was here when we did the first food park, wasn't my fault, but it was definitely the restaurants and town were concerned about the competition and build on another. But that's why I was surprised it came back up and no one seems to be upset about it. So.
Well, you know, it's interesting in Tualatin Lake, there was just an editorial, I think that runs the staffing agency. He wrote that he was originally not only opposed to food carts, but it's come around 180.
I think it's the fact that everybody's seen it and it's like a real that thing, and I definitely want to see how they change the perception of it.
Well, I think you've got controls on it very well thought out. So, yeah, if it's experimented somewhere else.
Yeah, a lot.
I think it also allows for local people to start small businesses
Yeah.
and help our local economy grow.
But when we walk the Thai place to the vets at the corner by the library, when we lost all the rest of it, and never rhythms of woods or whatever it is, when we traded those at the Five Guys in, that, you know, you're like, no, I want to get some Thai, I gotta go up to Wingo or out to somewhere else.
Right.
Somewhere else. This is not a zoning question, but when I've been to Westland, when I know when they have their events, it's usually during the day, but do they ever do like late night events? That'd be the only thing I think about with the timing, like if they decided to hold like some sort of event that went late the night, the only thing I think is go past those hours, but maybe
Yes.
something to think about.
At that point, we should know.
Yeah, just in case, yeah.
At that point, we'd already have that covered by noise nuisance regulations, so,
And the enclosed with walls.
so
But do we want to say, I mean, yeah, I guess that's true.
we already have regulations in place for that.
Well, that is my question. Also, do we allow outdoor music and venues or things like that to develop in a parking lot as is, or as of now? Completely different from this. It's right now silent on if you're gonna put a stage or performance area on there. So if I want to do a band in a parking lot, can I do that? If I do a band in the parking lot, are there any restrictions underneath?
That's what I'm saying, is because it's
Yeah.
a little different than what we've seen before, so that's why we're, if you're encouraging this, you know what I mean? Which is great, and I think that that's even could be great, but maybe
Yes.
we want to have just a little check on it. Getting too. I mean, or something, unless it's already in the code, in which case. It's fine.
I mean, I don't think we've discussed this internally, but I almost wonder if that would be to your use permit categories where
Yeah.
it might be like a
Like an
special
event,
event
yeah.
component that would require conditional use. Or get to review like a stage or some kind of amphitheater that might be proposed part of the food festival.
Yeah, but there are a couple in Portland that have permanent stages that are part of their setup and do regular like lunchtime, dinner time, you know, like local music.
I don't think we'd be opposed to something like that. I think we just
Right.
want to make sure that it's within.
The current noise.
I think we have some mechanisms existing in our code where we can look at that as a special.
Yeah, just in case. Make sure that everything-
I think it's, or looking at making sure it's a feasible option for them to have like a small stage, not like we're bringing like music in the park type concerts. But it's just that I've noticed when I've gone to other food carts, like the Happy Valley ones, they'll have performers that just pop up on like a little mini stage even inside that building. Like, well, they definitely don't have room anywhere else there to play, but they'll play inside, and it's helpful to make sure that I would say to make sure that that's allowed to some extent with that. Maybe if you even have to write it into the regulations, almost like a.
That's true. Yeah, you should allow that to happen. That's another good point. Not just the restricting it, like maybe if they wanted to, that could pump it more like.
Yeah.
if they wanted to.
In the form of an accessory use to the food cart pod.
Be an accessory use, but if it's an accessory use, is it just that it's an accessory use that doesn't become a nuisance? So it's like,
Within
it's,
normal, you know.
yeah, like is the noise ordinance itself effective enough to stop something from just becoming a detriment to the area? It's like, shoot, we said you could do a stage, we didn't expect that you would do a full on.
Like,
Well,
Yes.
Sure, and like maybe ensuring that the uses are current together, we don't, I wouldn't.
Yes,
If
not
you're
separate.
talking about like shutting down the food cart pods because no one's coming, and at night we'll make more money by having an event.
Yeah, that would be
Right,
different. And I feel like
yes.
that's a different experience.
Yeah,
Yes. I think you'd
absolutely.
want the food going at the same time.
Yeah.
Because there's the alcohol components and everything that there's a lot of food cart, they need the bars to continue also. And so when a lot of carts shut down, the bar keeps it going and stuff like that. So
Well, that's where I was trying to circle back to, what's the difference if we're treating a food pub like a restaurant that has brick and is gonna stay? There's plenty of bands playing at CIG station, anytime, anywhere, and they don't have to make this fuss. But is that just because they're indoors, the station's got that upstairs? The open crap right across the street from the park. And I don't know that we give them any fuss, so to be,
Yeah.
you know, making a fuss
Yeah.
about one thing and not the other. Sounds
Maybe
strange
that'd
to me.
be something worth addressing if it becomes an issue.
I can't forget, whatever the mechanism currently is for them to do that would thereby also apply to the transient restaurant. Well, I think you're kind of hitting on the operation. character.
Right.
So food cart pods, and that's why we have.
Right.
And it's
It's worth
tailored,
looking at.
yeah, tailored design standards for them. Yeah, because they just have some inherent operational characteristics that are different than a restaurant. Yeah, and I'll circle back to my first thought is that 2 is not the number for a pod. I'm gonna go with like somewhere between 5 and 8, I don't know, and definitely no, they don't need to see for anything less than, let's say 20, that's fine.
I think I agree with
Just makes sense.
Commissioner Kuhn on that, especially if, you know, the stakeholders are indicating that it would be necessary to have 12 before
Yeah.
the infrastructure required would be feasible, supported. You know, that's gonna close a lot of options off where you may have a site that is large enough to host 2 or maybe 3 pods, but no more than that, where, you know, it's not gonna be able to be used at all, and, you know.
I think part of this was they wanted the bathroom,
Yeah.
right? I think that's what it comes down to. That's why you're
That's
two,
huge.
is because they want the
So,
bathroom. which Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, so.
I have a huge part to weigh on that too, because I work a lot with food carts in Portland and Multnomah County. And Portland has chosen to take a hands-off approach with the food carts, and it's coming back to like, I mean, they're basically letting the market decide for that most part. Multnomah County and the Bureau of Environmental Services got a little irritated, they've stepped in and created their own codes. And so what they did find out, especially with Multnomah County that deals with all the complaints from these, is that customers are, and even food cart operators were really upset about not having the facilities there. So one of the #1 complaints that they get at the county is like, there's nowhere to use a bathroom. I got complaints about people going to the bathroom at other places because there wasn't something. So the threshold, I think, and definitely I know with Multnomah County, they say anything over 1 car becomes a 2-car pod to start pushing in these requirements for trash and everything like that, because these operators of food car pods, usually they're like, they throw it up there, they start collecting, become slumlords basically for a lot of these pop-up spots. And they usually don't make it. They have a revolving door of carts that come in and out, and they really aren't, it's not a destination place. So you can find
Not only,
a lot
if it's
of,
been tried elsewhere and that's found not to work, then that answers my question.
yeah.
Right.
So,
I think even at two cars, you're already thinking that you might stay there. You know what I mean? Versus 1, you're probably not gonna stay and keep at that location, but 2, you're starting to feel like you might stay there. Because I think that changes the experience.
Also thinking outside the customers going to the food carts, where we also need to protect the people who are running.
Yeah,
And they're
right.
accessible,
But yes,
accessibility
Break
to
times,
facilities, yeah.
yeah.
Well, and I think, what was it, West Lynn made like a crazy just jurisdictional choice, I think it says here. Any host of a site that has food carts for more than 5 hours and 1 calendar day from midnight to midnight must provide an RV style sewer, water and electrical hookup. Because you can have dry camping in an RV or whatnot without a utility hookup. But you need to be able to have washing hand sink, which your state code already requires. Operators have to have seating for customers if restrooms are readily accessible. So they're already required to do that to get their state permit, to get their county permit, to get. I don't know how they're getting out of it over there, but I don't know.
I did like your street. Requiring the street view, so you can check in the parking. So that's what I was gonna ask about the parking. So I know sometimes it's a little myth, but they kind of do that. At least gives you guys some sort of means to sort of make sure there's some sort of parking or a way to get there. Because I have been a few food court pods where I'm like running across the street. They've hopefully made it, you know? So I think that's great.
I think just build on that too, under state regulations or state rules, we're not allowed to require them to provide parking, but at least we can review it and make sure that if there is no parking, it is safely accessible. And then another thing I wanted to touch on earlier is one of the things we heard from our council too, is that they didn't want our code to be so permissive that food cart pods just pop up everywhere. So I think that having some of the, like, the plum restaurant building and letting the developers right size however many carts to suit their development kind of, in my mind, puts us in that sweet spot where it's hard enough, but still easy enough.
And you're trying to get like something like the destination, which I think is what people want.
Yes.
So I think that you're scaling that.
I don't think city council was thinking of some guy with a macaroni truck over at Lamb, you know, I don't think that's what they got.
Yeah, they're thinking a destination, probably in the corner area. Okay, did anybody have any questions about the locations? Because that was what we started with, and we didn't even talk about it.
Thought the locations pretty much nailed it. I mean, it opened up a lot of different areas across the city, everything like that.
have a feel for where one might fit.
We need something more.
Well, I would have to talk to our. We have some direct conversations with folks about maybe potential sites. But I haven't had those conversations. So I imagine there is interest in the downtown, but I'm not quite sure which sites.
A lot of people that I have talked to, in my little world or community of parents have said the spot on the corner where we want to put the overpass. Is they're like, why is that not a food cart pod right now? They're selling fireworks, palm trees, which I will stop by with the trees, but why is that not a food cart pod right now? So,
Yeah.
I have the same
Yes.
thought that everybody.
So I think it could.
Are we in?
That's where we're-
Appreciate we had some interest near intersection from property owners, but we also had interest with that little tiny blue spot down in the south end that maybe
Way down there by the high school.
Yes. People are stuck there by nothing. It's hot.
It's not set up for them to have access to anything, everything
They need
is
their own
downtown.
local
Or
area.
kind of anecdotally, but we're not so much to effective, but up in the Antler. Refer to it as the Antler, right? So up there,
Bridgeport.
yeah, there's a site, like off of McEwen. One of the property owners back there is.
Oh, I have heard it. referred to as the
So
antler.
the Conan truck can be at Tualatin without getting in trouble now?
Well, it always had been. It's been stated there wrong.
That's.
Yeah, and it's a different, they can do
But
it,
if
it's not
it
very long.
wasn't for,
It's a time
if
restriction.
he wanted to.
And he does, I've seen him there for.
If I was going to Molly's out of the back of my van, it's not a food cart, right? It's not the
Gotta
ice
see where
cream
the
guy
front
can still come
was.
through town. The ice cream guy can still.
This doesn't change what we already did, it just adds.
It doesn't,
So,
it doesn't remove any allowance, but it could.
just to add. And if we keep going, anybody have any other further comments that you guys would like to see? Or- I'm sure we can email you guys something if something.
Have- Two questions.
Okay.
So I,
Like that.
okay, so two questions on, with the requirement for paved areas. With that, if, totally understandable for the pedestrian areas and everything like that. And I do know that the costs, I mean, dealing with this on the Portland side, on the cost of, with all this in, the cost of bathrooms is up there. There are some great advances in portable, not portable bathrooms that can come in that are plumbed and ready to tie any full building permit, put them on there, even with some that come in shipping containers, so doable and make more financially feasible. The cost to run sewer and put the pedestals in is up there, including the grease trap interceptors and everything. The paving and all of those options will add up too. So if you have an existing site that's already paved, and they're just gonna cut it like they're converting a parking lot to a car plot, they're gonna cut in and put all the utilities. Would anybody agree that it's possible to say we could allow gravel?
No, it's not ADA.
Hold on, but not for pedestrian areas, but gravel for the vehicle area of where the food cart itself would be located or anything. So non.
Oh, underneath the cart. But does that affect the cleaning? If they were talking about it, power washing?
Yeah, that's probably storage.
This area is also aesthetically and also gravel and trimmed, it doesn't stay on the spot.
Okay, question number two. I have a site, I have a building on it. I have bushwhackers and I want to put, is it right?
And the vet clinic right behind it.
I've never been there.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I'm just guessing at this name here. All right, so I own bushwhackers and I want to develop a food cart pod out there with it because I've got too many complaints from my customers about the McDonald's. So I have a bathroom inside. Will that serve as my bathroom facility for the food cart pod? Because I'm putting it on my parking lot? Or do I still need to build a bathroom?
I think that's a really good question. I do know there are jurisdictions, Oak Grove being one of them, that if you are building in concert with an existing like operating restaurant, that it does allow you to be for that.
Okay.
Right now, I haven't built that into our ordinance, but I would think it's like refining about that.
Yeah.
Add on to the place.
And if it is going to be, then that it needs to be possibly like a proximity. So if we're taking the giant shopping center right now with the flooring area and everything like that, they put a little, I'm like, well, you can use the bathroom at the old Starbucks.
Right. Yeah, no, I think it needs to be, there needs to, we can workshop this in the back, yeah, but it needs to be a holistic, like development site.
Yeah.
As an restaurant and then you're adding on, no, you can't. Walk down a food cart pod and say, well, you can walk to the grocery store.
Right.
Yeah. allow no more than 1/4 mile or 5-minute walk from an MFU. So 1/4 mile is as far as you're gonna go in the worst case scenario.
Did you say the state code?
And that goes-
Quarter mile?
Yeah, 1/4 mile walk to the potty. 4 or 5 minutes. I was like,
So.
yeah, all right, make it 12 minutes in my boat walk. Yeah, so. Worst case scenario.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
No, I think it's really great. I like the idea that you kept it at, or that you bumped it up to 20 or at least with that, where it triggers that CU.
Yeah.
So despite the costs that do go in for that development, that difference between it, 20 carts is huge. Not to mention, it typically doesn't pencil out to go up to 20 carts. So if you look at the sites that did develop, and I'd say they've overdeveloped or they built max capacity, Happy Valley is one of them. If you go take a look at Happy Valley now, about half the carts now, they have a whole side that's pretty much empty. And so when it's just, that's what that area got. That's a very busy area, Happy Valley. And they have parking. Parking's crucial to make any of those carts, those big pods even work. So awesome. I think
100% trust your judgment for less than 5 months. We're good. Oh, that means it has-
I like the heights.
yeah, it worked.
Thank you. Thank you for your work. Thank you, guys. Okay, so communication from city staff, annual development code plan concept. I knew this got written in here, to remind you at the end of it.
And let's just, we've gone really long. This is really just a look ahead that in September, we're gonna bring you the first code plan. It is intended to be minor tweaks, fixes, typos, correcting. We reference the wrong figure here, we do this. It's nothing gonna be major. We are gonna try to rope in a few minor updates to meet new state law. None of the big bills that we talked about, like we're not going to do a code cleanup and add, SB 974 or something like that. But if there's use that needs to be added, zone to meet state law, we think that will include commentary with each update to say why. The reason that it did want to bring it up though is because it's going to be so minor, I don't know that it would be, we're intending to bring it in the same format that we would a larger text amendment. We're not going to necessarily do a work session to describe each little change, but the intention is to bring it to the meeting and propose to recommend support for each of them. Or recommend certain ones be pulled out because you don't feel they reach the threshold of a minor amendment or something like that. But that's kind of a look ahead of what we'll do in September. We'll bring you that code package for those things that wanted to do that each year.
It was just 3 years ago. We did a whole bunch of work to
We did
bring
bring
everything
everything
up to date, and then we condensed and combined this. Digitize. Thank you for the work. Thank you. Okay, so if there's no further business, I will take a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn. Zach second. Okay, and we're adjourned. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Right at 9. I know, it's like, well, yes.